Welcome to the Fighter's Forecast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 29 of the Fighter's Forecast. This one is coming hot off the heels of UFC 316 this past weekend. We're recording these episodes pretty close by. Usually we start off with a little bit of how you doing, what's been going on, has anything changed in your life? But if you listen to our last episode, probably already know what's going on in our lives. Not much has changed. It maybe is just an hour or two later in the night. How you feeling, Drew? You know, we just broke down UFC 316. Are you feeling refreshed? You feeling like you could still break down the fight night this weekend? Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley, a very good welterweight fight. Drew, has anything changed in your life in this last hour, or do you have any insights that people can kind of carry on into their week?
Nothing particular, but I have discovered a newfound love for Mick Parkin.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Apart from that, nothing really groundbreaking since then. But I think
if you haven't listened to our last episode, it'll make more sense. You should. If you do. Probably towards the end too. Don't just listen to the beginning. It'll make more sense if you do. But yeah, it's a pretty good for a fight night card. Honestly, it's a really good card. There's some pretty good fights from the main card all the way to the prelims. We're not going to break down the whole card just because we don't think that there's quite enough substance there to do that. But we are going to break down some fights that have stood out to us. Drew, do you want to introduce the main event and kick off the breakdown there?
Yeah, for sure. So first off, we have a welterweight matchup. You have Kamaru Usman. No words really needed to describe him. One of the best welterweight fighters that we've seen in at least the last 5 years. Insanely dominant. Run within a division, being able to beat guys in such dominant fashion like Colby Covington, even beat Leon Edwards prior to the head kick knockout. Blanking on the name. Jorge Masvidal. Gilbert Burns. Masvidal. Very impressive fighter.
Colby, yeah.
He initially made a move to 185, which is where he fought Khamzat Chimaev, but didn't necessarily go his way. I think he performed very well, especially going against a guy like Khamzat Chimaev. I thought like his striking was very good, and I think he was, and Khamzat himself says that Kamaru Usman was his toughest fight that he's had within the UFC, but it appears that he's moved back to 170. I think this will be an interesting matchup. It'll be interesting to see how well he fights, especially because honestly so much time has passed since his last fight, especially since his fight against Khamzat. But I'm very interested to see that. And then you have Joaquin Buckley, a guy who's been around for a decent while. I think most people will recall his viral knockout against Impa Kasanganay.
How long ago was that at this point? Like
that's at least 4 years, I would think.
Different weight class too. He was at 185 at that point.
Yeah. And then, but since then he's been on a very good tear. I think the first fight that kind of started that, I believe, was, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I remember it was an Apex fight, and then after that he fought Ruzaboyev, and then since then he fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Colby Covington. Some guys that you might argue were out of their prime, but still very impressive performances against guys who have been at the top of the division for a long time, and facing another guy who is getting closer to the end of his career, but at the same time, it is still Kamaru Usman, and it'll be interesting to see who comes out of this. And it's a weird implication too, because if you look at Kamaru, if he wins, like, is this like how many fights would he need until he possibly gets a title? In the inverse, if Buckley wins, how impressive is a win against Usman? How much does that affect his ranking? How does that affect where he stands in the list of contenders? Overall, a very interesting fight and a really good main card coming off UFC 316. It isn't often that we have a really good Apex fight or a really good fight night directly after a pay-per-view. Very good card, I would say.
Sure, yeah. Buckley is the minus 265 favorite coming back with Usman at plus 200. Number 7 in Buckley versus number 5 in Usman. I mean, it's a matchup that makes a lot of sense. I think if there was a lot of talk about Usman staying at middleweight and potentially fighting Robert Whittaker, which I would have actually still really liked to see. I think that could have been a really exciting fight for both guys. But I'm not mad at this matchup at all. I think it's proving that the new crop of welterweights is truly, a lot of people have been saying that this is the best division in the UFC at this point, welterweight, which is really an interesting switch, because I remember even when we were recording last year, it was one of the worst. It was bantamweight the top with lightweight, and then welterweight was somewhere near probably the bottom 5 in terms of divisional rankings. But I agree. Buckley started his career in the UFC at 185, and he was very much a ish fighter. He was winning some fights. Obviously, he had the KO of the year, spinning freaking, I don't even know what you'd call that, jumping back kick against Impa Kasanganay, who went on to have a really good career in PFL. But, since then, like you said, he had some wins, had some losses. But once he moved down to welterweight, he beat Alex Morono, Andre Fialho, Colby Covington, most recently, Stephen Thompson. And now he's going to fight Kamaru Usman. And, with a win here, he could move into the top 5, potentially be a fight or two away from that title shot. And like you said, Usman is getting to that point where this is a really, not necessarily a must win, because Buckley's a really good guy, and he's also a big underdog. But if you lose this fight, then you're gonna become one of those champions that gets put in that range where you're kind of fighting the almost like a Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. A couple weeks ago, like you're one of the former champions who's getting put against these really highly touted prospects in the hopes almost that they can build a name off of you. So really exciting fight. I think it's a great fight for the Georgian crowd, and I think I'm going to go. In terms of a prediction, it's really hard. I really want to pick Usman. You know what? I'm gonna let me hear what you think first, and then I'm gonna pick. I think I have my idea in mind, but I want to form it a little bit more before I say it in front of our massive audience.
I completely forgot to give my pick. But yeah, I mean, I want to sit here and say that it's Kamaru Usman. Like, he's still an insanely talented fighter, but the main issue, I think, is the time away. And not only the time away, but coming down from a weight class. I think when Usman moved up to 185, he was doing it with the anticipation that he was going to stay at 185, actually fight for the belt. I think there was a situation where if Usman had won that fight against Chimaev, like, people were thinking that winner, and Dana said it himself, that it was intended that the winner of that fight was going to fight for the belt.
I forgot about that, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's crazy how much time has passed since then, and also how much time has passed since Usman actually fought at 170. I think his fight against Leon Edwards was not necessarily impressive. I think he had like a few moments at the start, but it really seemed like he kind of just gassed out near the end. Not even gassed out, just kind of just got out. I think Leon just outclassed him from pretty much every aspect within that fight. I don't think Joaquin Buckley is as well-rounded as Leon Edwards. I think Joaquin Buckley kind of brings this, I wouldn't say brute strength, but he kind of has this insanely athletic style where he is able to get, I mean, look at his knockout against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. It was just pure power. I mean, it takes so much skill to be able to set something like that up against a guy with the striking resume that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has. But I mean, I think, if I'm being completely honest, I think Joaquin Buckley wins this. I think he's going to really try and grapple with Usman. That's probably going to be, if Usman does win, it would probably be from grappling, if he can somehow manage to get a submission or really gas Buckley out within the first few rounds. But I think Buckley is just too young for Usman, and I think he's more active, and he's just going to be better prepared for this fight in comparison to Usman. So I would probably say, I'll say Buckley by decision. I think Usman still has very good technique, and I think he'll be able to not get submitted, but I do think it's probably going to be 3-2 Buckley or 4-1 Buckley, most likely.
Wow. Yeah. I was going back and forth. I was originally going to pick Buckley. Part of this is love for the veterans. Part of this is I feel bad because I think I picked every single favorite on last week's card. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to hope that we see the Usman of old here. Not that I don't like Buckley. I think he's a cool guy, but I would like to see Usman get a win here. Still prove that he's got something left in this division. And, I think he does. I think he showed flashes of grit. I think he showed a lot in that Chimaev fight that he's, he can still hang in the pocket and bang. So I don't know if he's going to get a finish. I think, like you said, if he does, it'll probably be a submission, but I'm going to go with Usman by decision. I think it'll be a good back and forth fight where it gets tricky for Usman in spots, but I'm going to go Usman. I'm going to pick the underdog here and go Usman by decision.
Interesting. Very interesting. How old is Gilbert? Is he 40?
Oh, I don't think he's 40.
Because I was wondering if Usman was the oldest in the division, because Usman's 38.
Yeah. Wonder Boy is definitely 40.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But not to go on like a side tangent, but
Gilbert is 38, so they're both 38 up there. Yeah.
It would be very interesting. And I guess the question that kind of comes from that is, I mean, we don't have to necessarily stick on this one the most, but say Usman does win, who do you, and I guess it also depends on the way in which he does win. Let's say Usman goes out there and just like flatlines Buckley.
Yeah.
What fight do you make next? I mean, I think maybe a fight against Shavkat would be a good one. I think that's a good fight for him to come. First off, Shavkat would be coming back. I think he had an ACL injury after his fight against Ian Gary. That would be interesting. Maybe even do Leon Edwards 4. Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah.
But but yeah, I mean, what do you see there? Because I mean, this won't be an easy fight for Kamaru Usman, I don't think. But at the same time, I don't think this necessarily automatically elevates him to title contender. So what do you think would be the next step should he win?
Oh man, he's 38, right? So like you said, this is likely his last run. It probably should be. I think if he beats, I'm going to give two options here. I think most likely, if Usman wins, he probably fights one more time. I would like to see maybe a Bilal Muhammad fight. Coming off of a loss, he's the number one contender, but not really in the UFC's eyes. I don't think he's going to get that title shot anytime soon. So I think if Usman wants to go for a title one more time, because maybe he sees JDM as a very winnable fight, I could see him going for that Bilal Muhammad fight, or I think he retires. I think you either take one more crack at that, or you say, I'm 38. My knees are dusted. I've been wrestling in combat all my life.
His knees have been dusted since the second true. Leon Edwards fight. Those things are running on hopes and dreams at this point.
Dude, oh my gosh, it's so hard to watch those training videos. But yeah, I think one of those two. Because if you beat Joaquin Buckley, what else do you have to prove? You're in conversation for the welterweight, one of the best welterweights. I mean, you're definitely top 3, maybe even top 2 behind GSP. So I would like to see him retire. That's my opinion. Now, it's an interesting conversation because we could probably do a whole episode on this, but it's like,
when's the best time to leave?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, if he beats Joaquin Buckley, when is too early? Like, Volkanovski kind of broke the script, right? Like, he got, it was in a really bad spot, and then he came back and he won the belt, and he's a champion now. But if you're Usman, like, do you let's say he loses this fight, then he ends his UFC career still as one of the GOATs, but he's on a little bit of a skid, right? Like, he kind of fulfilled the narrative of like even the greatest in our sport go off on skids. But if he wins, like, it's going to be hard for him not to go for another fight. So what do you? I guess we're probably talking too much about this, but what do you think of that? Like, do you think he should? When do you think the best time for a guy like Usman to retire would be?
I mean, it depends on circumstance because not every loss is a bad loss. I think. I mean, the thing is, like, say Khamzat Chimaev beats Dricus du Plessis, and let's say he gets like 4 or 5 title defenses. He's like a very dominant fighter. No one would look at that in a bad way. They would just look at it as Usman went up and he put on a tough fight against a guy who became one of the best middleweights that we've seen in a long time. And with Buckley, this isn't necessarily the same scenario. I mean, that's not to say that Buckley can't contend for the title, but he definitely doesn't have that same ceiling, or at least it appears so. That way, I mean, look at the guys above him. You have Shavkat Rakhmonov, you have Ian Gary, you have Bilal Muhammad, you have, maybe not Bilal. I think just for the fact that he's like aging out, I don't think Bilal stays around for much longer, but you have Sean Brady, you have JDM. Like, I don't see Buckley making it a lot farther. Not to say he couldn't, not to say it's impossible, but I think it just depends on potential and how that affects your legacy. I think if Kamaru goes out and beats him, I'd maybe say it's probably best to retire then. I think if I'm being a realist, could Kamaru Usman somehow come out and contend for the title and win? For sure. But I think that, and this is the issue that happens sometimes, like, you have these comebacks where fighters do come back and win the title, and then they lose right after. And then it's like, what even happened? I think if Usman did somehow win the title, it would be a great story, but I think he would just lose to the next fight just because of his age. And I think if you come out and you win this fight, it's very similar to the Dustin Poirier Max Holloway situation, where if Dustin goes out and wins, like, it's just kind of like a right out into the sunset ending. And I mean, he's not in the Apex. It's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia. It's going to be a venue. That might be one of the reasons that it actually isn't a venue, because like, it would suck to have a guy like Kamaru Usman retire in an empty UFC building. But yeah, I mean, if I was Kamaru Usman, I would be thinking, I'm like, chances are I probably have one more fight in me. If I do win this fight, it's probably better that I go out while I'm on top. But
I think we should do a whole episode on this, honestly. I think this could be a cool topic.
Yeah, for sure. It just turns into like those like maps where it's like, did you do this? Yes. No.
Yeah.
No, it's like deciding like when should you retire?
Yeah, seriously.
And then like the final one is like, is your name John Jones? Yeah, no. Yeah. Restart the list.
Yeah, there's just so many factors that go into it and so many examples of it going wrong. So it's like hard to, I feel like just like you said, the more I think about it, it's like literally like I'm going into a rabbit hole in my own brain. I'm like, do you go the Khabib route? And because like, it's like, oh, he retired on top. And then it's like, but he could have had more, you know what I mean? It's like an infinite YouTube rabbit hole, but it's just thinking about like fighter legacy. But anyways, we could get into that a different day. I feel like we're getting a little delirious here. Let's move into the next fight. Rose Namajunas versus Miranda Maverick at women's flyweight, the co-main event. Really interesting fight here. Rose Namajunas, 14-7. You know, one of the best of all time in this division, honestly. Came out of the Ultimate Fighter, multiple time champion. Probably her biggest career win was that insane KO of Weili Zhang. That head kick, a beautiful head kick. Coming off of a loss to Erin Blanchfield, but you know, Blanchfield is I don't remember exactly where she is in that division, but she is definitely, here I can pull it up real quick. She is number 6, so you know, top 10 fighter. Just recently fought the number 1 contender fight. So Rose is right up there. Miranda Maverick is coming off a win, but coming off a win against Jamie Lynn Horth. This should be a good fight, at least for the fact that it is a Rose Namajunas fight, and I'll always tune into that. I love the Trevor Whitman camp. Miranda is younger. Let me pull up the betting odds here.
Rose is a minus 280 favorite.
Yeah, so I think that's deserved. Big time favorite. She's been in these spots before. She's a very. It seems like, to me, like Rose Namajunas has some of like the highest potential in the bantamweight, the women's flyweight division, and she's fulfilled that so many times, like against Zhang Weili, you know, multiple time defending champion. But then she has these fights sometimes where she really does not live up to that, and it seems to be she's someone who struggled with like mental health issues for a long time and had to step back from the sport quite a few times. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what version of Rose we see, but I still do think that she is the better fighter here, a deserved favorite, and, you know, definitely still hungry, or else she would not be taking these kind of fights. So I'm going to say Rose Namajunas by decision.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said everything. I think experience is a big factor here. I mean, anytime you have someone who has beaten Weili Zhang twice, beating Weili Zhang twice is insanely impressive. I mean, obviously that's going back almost 8 years with the Joanna fights, but I mean,
at that point, Joanna was like one of the best. Top. Yeah, like she was. Yeah,
and I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, Miranda has the age advantage by about 5 years, but I mean, everything else is relatively similar, like statistics wise. I guess the one thing that's standing out to me is the takedown average. Miranda averages about 2.4 takedowns per fight. Rose is about 1.4, and it'll be interesting to see if that grappling affects if Miranda tries to rely on grappling at the start of the fight. But yeah, I mean, if we look at Rose, if we compare the records, it's the people that they've been fighting against are just not on the same level, I'd say. So, I mean, if we're going purely off experience, I think you just have to give it Rose. I mean, she's going against some of the best flyweights that are currently in division. I mean, if you look at her last 5 fights, you have Carla Esparza, Menon Ferro, Amanda Ribas, Tracy Cortez, Erin Blanchfield, all really, really good fighters. I think, like you said, I think she's more experienced. I think she's probably got the advantage here. And I think this is also a good fight for her just going into, because after her loss to Erin Blanchfield, it might be good to give her a fight to kind of refocus and reassess what she wants to do within the division. So not to completely copy you, but I'll agree. Rose Namajunas by decision.
Yeah. Really quickly before we move on, it's crazy that Rose Namajunas has been in the UFC since 2014. You know what I mean? And
she's 32.
Yeah. So like she has literally like started and will definitely end her career in the UFC and like has developed as a fighter through that. So it's really cool to see fighters like that you kind of get to see from like you say, it's the most fun to follow fighters when you've seen them from the beginning, but like especially a fighter like Rose that literally like most of her record was in the UFC. You know what I mean? So respect to the legend. And, you know, we're both definitely going to pick Rose Namajunas in this one. So yeah, leading into the next one, I know you have a fight that you want to talk about as well, but I'll give my last shout out fight here, or last fight that I'm most excited about here. There's some really good ones like Edmund Shabazian's on this card, but one that really stands out to me is Cody Garbrandt versus Raoni Barcelos, 2 bantamweight fighters who are, Barcelos is 38 years old. That's crazy for that division, but honestly, Garbrandt being 33 is even more surprising to me that he's that young, but a really good fight here. You know, Garbrandt was at the top of that division. Like we were talking about Dominic Cruz in the last episode. I mean, his fight against Dominic Cruz was one of the most electric performances in UFC history. You know, like a lot of people put that performance like right below McGregor versus Alvarez in terms of just dominance and flash. So it's a really interesting fight here. And you know, Barcelos in a similar, I shouldn't say similar, but he hasn't had nearly the career, but he has been a contender in this division for a long time. since 2017, I believe. And, he's coming off of a submission win against Christian Quinones. Before that, lost to Kyler Phillips, who was a great contender, and then got knocked out by Umar with that brutal knee. I don't know if you remember that. That was Umar's big KO before his title fight. And then in terms of Cody Garbrandt, obviously I talked about the legacy. He's had such a illustrious career since 2015, but recently he got choked out by Davidson, and I think was that Davidson's flyweight bantamweight debut. I believe that was right.
I believe so. Yeah, that was his first. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was either. No, I think he fought. Was it Rob Font?
You know what? I think you might be right. Yeah, right before that one. Yeah, let me check real quick. Yeah, but
it was. Yeah, he fought Rob Font, then Cody Garbrandt.
Okay, yep. Yeah. So, but still, that's not a loss to hang your hat over. Obviously, Davison is, one of the best flyweights ever, so that's not bad. So, he's had an up and down last couple of years in the UFC, but you can't deny the hand speed, the boxing, the head movement. I mean, that'll never go away for as long as he's in the UFC. So, this is honestly a coin flip for me. But I think I'm the 38-year-old bantamweight is going to struggle against Cody's hand speed. And, Raoni has some really good wrestling, but Cody was known for his wrestling early in his career as well. So I'm going to say Cody Garbrandt by round 2 knockout. I think the hands are going to find the chin of Raoni, and it's going to be not a quick one, not an easy one, but it's going to go Garbrandt's way.
Nice. I like it. I've heard it before, and it's always it's the most interesting quote I've ever heard. The best UFC fighter of all time is Cody Garbrandt on December 30th, 2016. Yes. On that night. I think an important detail people are forgetting is Cody Garbrandt's career. I wouldn't necessarily say it's been disappointing, but I think people have a misconception of his career. I mean, if you look at his losses, his loss to Davison Figueiredo, Kai Kara-France, Rob Font, TJ Dillashaw twice. I mean, he's not losing to bad fighters. He's losing to some of the best fighters within each division. And I think when you compare that to Barcelos, I think not only are his wins not as impressive, I think his losses aren't necessarily as impressive either. I think including his loss to Umar, I think Garbrandt's got experience, and I think his striking is really going to stand out, and age obviously plays a factor as well. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking around the same idea. I think I'll have it. I think it's gonna be a little bit quicker. I think I think the game plan is to not have the same situation with Figueiredo, where I think Cody did very good in the first round. I believe against Davison Figueiredo, and then I think Davison was seeing that striking. He was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm gonna grapple. So I think Cody's gonna try and avoid that this time. I think he's gonna come out really heavy in the first round, and I'll say Cody Garbrandt by TKO first round.
It's interesting. Raoni Barcelos is actually the minus 162 favorite. So get ready for this one. No love for Cody Garbrandt from the fans. You get it because the nickname there. But sorry, it's getting late over here. Can't blame me for that one. But yeah, so Cody Garbrandt is the underdog here. But I still think that we're both in the right. It's crazy that Cody Garbrandt is younger than Raoni Barcelos, considering their UFC tenures. You know what I mean? I
keep thinking that Cody Garbrandt is like really old.
Yeah, he seems like he would be, but no, he could still be in his prime.
He's got a new cut too.
Yeah,
I don't know what the new cut. How getting a new haircut affects your fighting, your win rate. Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think I'm very surprised that he's 33. I feel like when I think of TJ Dillashaw, when I think of Cody Garbrandt, I really think of around that TJ Dillashaw, like early Aljamain Sterling era. And I kind of feel like I always imagine him as like almost the Dustin Poirier of that time, where he's kind of like aged out. But no, he's 33. He very easily has 4 more years of fighting.
Maybe we can get some love for Cody Garbrandt. All right.
I'm quit your day job.
I'll be here all night, guys. So don't worry about me.
There's gotta be like a cricket in the soundboard or something.
Yeah, no, I'll add that thereafter. I'll find that. But yeah, Drew, I think there was one more fight that you wanted to talk about on this card before we move into our next special segment here, if we're gonna do it like that. So what's the last fight you want to talk about here before we move on?
Yeah, so this is I don't necessarily know if this is a fight that's on a lot of people's radar, but it's a prelim fight. On the topic, the prelims for this card are actually pretty decent. You got Michael Chiesa, you got Paul Craig, you got Charles Jordan, Ricky Simon, Philip Rowe, a bunch of like really kind of underground, I wouldn't necessarily say underground fighters that have been able to put on good performances. But the one that stands out the most to me is Malcolm Wellmaker versus Cris Moutinho. People remember Cris Moutinho, green hair.
He's back.
Got his head bounced like a basketball against Sean O'Malley back in the day. He's back, and I mean, I have not necessarily been looking at any film since he's improved, since his fights after that. But anyone who can make it back to the UFC after getting cut is obviously doing something right. Malcolm Wellmaker might not be well known by UFC fans. He's this will be his second fight in the UFC. I first found him when I was watching a Contender Series, but he's a very entertaining fighter. His first fight was, I believe, a little less than a month ago, and he got a knockout KO in the first round. Very entertaining fighter. Yeah, I think I like Cris. I think he put on one of the more entertaining fights that we've seen in a long time. It really sucks that he's getting fed to the wolves in this fight. I think Malcolm's like one of those next guys at bantamweight. He's been very impressive from what I've seen. Obviously, I'm not going to say that he's like up for a title next, but yeah, this is a very good fight. I think I'm going to give it Malcolm Wellmaker the second round TKO. I think the striking is a bit of an issue, and unless Cris Moutinho has really started investing in grappling, I don't think he's going to be able to combat the power that Malcolm's coming in with.
Yeah, no, definitely an interesting one. I didn't see his Contender fight, but I did see his UFC debut. So I agree, undefeated fighter. That bantamweight division is obviously a shark tank, but who better of a test than Cris Moutinho? But you're right, dude. Poor guy, Cris Moutinho. He comes in on short notice, fights Sean O'Malley, loses that fight brutally. But everybody's like, he loses it, but he didn't get. I think it was like a corner stoppage type deal. It wasn't like he got knocked out. He just was taking too much damage.
So Herb just stopped the fight while they were both standing for some reason. It was it was like one of the more confusing stoppages because there was like 50 seconds left too.
Yes,
in the fifth round.
Yeah, but so then later that year he fights Guido Canetti. His one real actual UFC chance, right, to prove himself. He loses that fight by round one knockout, and then he gets cut from the UFC. Apparently, he's had a pretty good run outside the UFC in the regional scene in the last 3 years. So getting another chance here, but yet again, he's given an undefeated guy. Like, what in the world is the UFC doing? But I think I'm on the same page here. I think when you take the amount of damage that Cris has taken, and his not old, but he's 32. And he's taken more damage than that. So I think Malcolm's going to end it pretty early here. I'm really impressed with his striking, and I think it could be another round one finish. I feel bad for even saying that because Cris has definitely earned his way back in, but I think it could be a hard one. Yeah. This
isn't changing my pick at all, but interesting thing I just picked up on Cris Moutinho's last 5 fights have all been finishes with 3 knockouts and 2 submissions. So
damn. Okay.
Who knows? Maybe he figured something out. But yeah, 5-0 since he got cut from the UFC. Be very interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm not going to break these fights down, but I'll shout out. There's an argument that some of these prelim fights are better than a lot of the main card fights, which is kind of funny. Michael Chiesa versus Court McKee, that's a really good one. I lean Chiesa there. Ricky Simone, Charles Jourdain, like you said, that's a really good fight. Super explosive guys. Ricky Simone handed Merab his 1 UFC loss. So that's a really interesting fight. Paul Craig versus Adolfo Bellato, that's a really good fight too. So don't sleep on this card, guys. This is a really good one of those good cards that you can kind of watch top to bottom and you won't be super disappointed. So yeah, really good fight night this weekend. Very excited to watch. And I think a lot of these fights, it's going to be a good showcase for a lot of these fighters and a lot of divisions on the table here to, bring forward a lot of implications for the future. So I think that is probably it. Drew, I think we can end this episode here. That was episode 29 of the Fighters Forecast. Thank you guys for listening. And I'm Henry.
I'm Drew.
And we are out. Thank you.